But I met Sidney in 1949, and I had to say and do just vicious things to Sidney. The young fella I met so long ago developed into a brilliant actor, director, and writer, and has become a man we all admire.
That laugh, cold, calculating, absolutely terrifying. Richard Widmark burst onto screens in 1947 with a giggle that froze blood and a sneer that redefined what evil could look like. He pushed a wheelchair-bound woman down a flight of stairs and somehow made audiences want more. But here's what the terror masked. Widmark wasn't just another heavy-playing bad guys for paychecks. He was a psychological archaeologist, digging into the shadowy corners of human nature that most actors avoided. Where others saw villains, he found broken people. Where others played monsters, he discovered men. For 4 decades, Widmark navigated Hollywood's moral landscape like a detective solving crimes that hadn't been committed yet. He understood something fundamental about storytelling that escaped his peers. The most interesting characters lived in the gray zones between right and wrong, sanity and madness, love and hate. Widmark studied people the way scientists study specimens. He collected behavioral tics, emotional patterns, and psychological tells from everyone he encountered. But certain performers captivated him completely. Actors who weren't afraid to explore the basement levels of human experience. These weren't his co-stars or drinking companions. These were the artists who proved that darkness could be illuminating, that evil could teach lessons about good, and that the most honest performances often came from the most dishonest characters. 6. Spencer Tracy. Richard Widmark watched Spencer Tracy work like a predator studying prey. Not because he wanted to hunt him, but because he needed to understand how someone could make the impossible look inevitable. Tracy possessed something Widmark craved, the ability to disappear completely while remaining utterly present. No tricks, no gimmicks, no theatrical flourishes. Just pure, distilled humanity served without garnish or apology. Tracy made acting look like breathing, which meant he was suffocating everyone else without trying. What fascinated Widmark wasn't Tracy's range or technique. It was his surgical precision with emotion. Tracy could devastate audiences with a glance, then rebuild them with a smile. He controlled the temperature of every scene without breaking a sweat or raising his voice. On film, Tracy demonstrated something revolutionary, that ordinary men could be extraordinary without announcing it. That strength lived in stillness, not storm. Widmark, who built his early career on explosive villainy, watched Tracy and learned that sometimes the quietest performances cut deepest. Their paths crossed at industry gatherings where Widmark observed Tracy's off-camera behavior. The same understated power, the same refusal to perform when cameras weren't rolling. Tracy didn't switch personalities between action and cut. He simply existed with consistent authenticity. What Widmark respected most was Tracy's fearless commitment to simplicity. In an industry that rewarded excess, Tracy chose restraint. He proved that audiences would lean forward to catch whispered truth rather than sit back for shouted lies. 5. Glenn Ford. Richard Widmark recognized something dangerous hiding behind Glenn Ford's all-American smile. While audiences saw the dependable hero, Widmark spotted the coiled tension underneath. Ford was a loaded weapon disguised as a safety blanket. Ford operated in frequencies most actors couldn't detect. His performances hummed with suppressed violence, barely containing fury that could explode without warning. But unlike Widmark's theatrical villainy, Ford's menace whispered instead of screamed. That restraint made him infinitely more threatening. Their Western collaborations revealed Ford's true genius. He could suggest more violence in a pause than most actors delivered in full gunfights. Ford understood that anticipation tortured audiences more effectively than action. He'd let silence build until viewers forgot to breathe, then strike with surgical precision. What impressed Widmark was Ford's refusal to telegraph his intentions. No warning signs, no preparation time. Ford would shift from gentle to lethal in the span of a heartbeat, and somehow both personas felt equally authentic. That kind of emotional flexibility required either exceptional skill or actual psychological instability. Behind cameras, Ford maintained the same unsettling calm. Professional, prepared, but somehow unpredictable. Widmark watched him navigate Hollywood politics with the same controlled aggression he brought to his roles. Friendly but unreachable, cooperative but autonomous. Ford taught Widmark that true power never advertised itself. While others flexed and postured, Ford simply existed with quiet confidence that made opposition feel pointless. He proved that pure professional competence wrapped in deceptive accessibility. Fourth, Edward G. Robinson. Richard Widmark discovered a kindred spirit in Edward G. Robinson, though neither man would admit it publicly. Robinson had spent decades perfecting the art of making ugly beautiful, transforming gangsters into tragic figures worthy of sympathy and fear. What connected them wasn't their shared appetite for villainy, it was their intellectual approach to evil. Robinson never played criminals as mindless thugs. His gangsters read books, collected art, and spoke multiple languages. He proved that sophisticated monsters were far more terrifying than simple brutes. Widmark studied Robinson's technique like a doctoral thesis. The way he used his compact frame to suggest volcanic power, how he made every gesture deliberate, every word a calculated weapon. Robinson taught him that physical limitations could become psychological advantages if handled correctly. Behind the scenes, Robinson revealed another dimension that captivated Widmark. The man was a genuine intellectual, fluent in 7 languages and passionate about Renaissance art. He approached acting with scholarly precision, researching his characters like historical subjects rather than fictional constructs. Their conversations at industry events fascinated Widmark more than any classroom lecture. Robinson discussed human psychology with clinical detachment, dissecting motivation and behavior like a forensic pathologist examining evidence. He understood that great villains weren't born evil. They were created by circumstances, choices, and corrupted ideals. Robinson showed Widmark that criminals could be philosophers, that evil could be articulate, and that the most dangerous enemies were often the most cultured. He proved that intelligence amplified menace rather than diminishing it. For Widmark, Robinson represented the cerebral side of darkness, evil with education, menace with meaning. 3. Henry Fonda. Richard Widmark thought he understood deception until he worked with Henry Fonda. Here was America's sweetheart, the lanky farm boy with honest eyes and a gentle voice. But Widmark detected something else lurking beneath that wholesome exterior, something cold and calculating. Fonda possessed a gift that terrified other actors. He could access genuine darkness while maintaining his image as the moral center of American cinema. In films like The Oxbow Incident and Once Upon a Time in the West, Fonda revealed glimpses of the predator hiding behind the Prairie Saint. What mesmerized Widmark was Fonda's surgical control over his persona. He could flip between benevolent and malevolent with microscopic adjustments. A slight change in vocal tone, a barely perceptible shift in eye movement. Suddenly, the trusted neighbor became the dangerous stranger. During their collaborations, Widmark watched Fonda work with scientific precision. No wasted energy, no unnecessary emotion. Fonda approached each scene like a chess master planning moves 7 steps ahead. He understood that audiences trusted him completely, which made his rare moments of menace absolutely devastating. Off-camera, Fonda maintained the same enigmatic distance. Polite but unrevealing, professional but somehow untouchable. Widmark recognized a fellow student of human behavior, someone who observed more than he participated. Fonda taught Widmark that the most effective villains were the ones nobody suspected, that evil wore many masks, but the most dangerous was respectability. He proved that corruption could smile, shake hands, and pass for virtue. For Widmark, Fonda represented the ultimate acting challenge. making audiences question everything they believed about heroes and villains. 2. Barbara Stanwyck. Richard Widmark met his match in Barbara Stanwyck, and he knew it the moment she walked onto set. Here was someone who understood that strength wasn't about volume or aggression. It was about refusing to break no matter how much pressure was applied. Stanwyck operated with the precision of a surgeon and the instincts of a street fighter. She could slice through scenes with surgical accuracy, finding emotional arteries other actors couldn't locate. Widmark watched her work and realized he'd been playing checkers while she mastered chess. What stunned him wasn't her toughness. Hollywood was full of tough broads playing roles. It was her fearless embrace of moral complexity. Stanwyck's characters existed in ethical quicksand, making impossible choices with impossible consequences. Their scenes together crackled with mutual recognition. Two actors who understood that vulnerability was just another weapon in the arsenal. Stanwyck could devastate opponents with calculated weakness just as effectively as Widmark destroyed them with calculated cruelty. What he respected most was her refusal to soften edges for likability. 1. James Kagny. Richard Widmark discovered his blueprint for controlled chaos the first time he watched James Kagny explode across a screen. Here was pure kinetic energy harnessed by surgical intelligence. A human typhoon that somehow knew exactly where every piece of debris would land. Kagny didn't just act, he combusted. But unlike other performers who mistook volume for intensity, Kagny's eruptions were calculated masterpieces of emotional engineering. Every gesture served a purpose. Every outburst advanced the story. He taught Widmark that rage could be poetry if channeled through discipline. What captivated Widmark wasn't Kagny's famous temper or his machine gun delivery. It was his fearless commitment to making despicable characters magnetic. Kagny's gangsters were monsters, but they were fascinating monsters. He found humanity in psychopaths without excusing their crimes. Most importantly, Kagny demonstrated that villains could be artists, that evil could be beautiful if presented with sufficient skill and conviction. He transformed criminality into ballet, brutality into performance art. For Widmark, Kagny represented the summit of dangerous charisma, the proof that audiences would follow anyone brave enough to lead them into darkness with sufficient style and conviction. Richard Widmark built a career exploring humanity's shadow side. These 6 actors taught him that darkness wasn't the enemy of light, it was its most honest companion. In Hollywood's moral maze, they found truth by refusing to look away.